36 years after Beetlejuice made his big screen debut in 2024, a sequel comes out titled Beetlejuice Beetle Juice. Now, does this sequel hold a candle to the original? But most importantly, is Beetlejuice Beetle Juice any good? Let's find out. Hello everyone, I'm K Swope, and hey, I just got into the theater seeing Beetlejuice Beetle Juice today, so I have a lot to say about it. I'm throwing this review up. I'm very excited to dive into it, but before we do, I want to let everybody know a few things. For one, with all my movie reviews, I will be scoring this movie on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 meaning it is absolute trash, garbage, never want to see it again in my life. 10 being Citizen Kane, basically. So, that being said, we're going to rank it somewhere between those two numbers. And we are also going to be having a spoiler section of this review, so we're not going full spoilers right off the bat. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, that's fine. We're going to have timestamps below on the YouTube bar. You can go check those out, letting you know when the spoilers are coming up. We'll give you plenty of warning. But I'm going to give my spoiler-free thoughts, and then I'll dive a little deeper into my spoiler thoughts afterwards. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the good things about this movie and the bad things about this movie in that order. And then we'll go into the spoiler good things, the spoiler bad things, and then we'll come back to the conclusion. We'll keep it spoiler-free there, though. So if you want to see the movie, you haven't seen it yet, you want to watch this review, that's fine. You can just skip the spoiler section and meet us at the conclusion. But that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the good things about this movie. So the first thing about this movie that I like, something that makes it really stand out, is that it's not a legacy sequel. Now, when I say legacy sequel, what I mean is you've seen movies like the Halloween franchise did this. I know Scream was trying to do this. I don't know how that's going now. The Star Wars sequels, they were trying to do this, but basically, they're trying to take the old characters, bring them back, and then set up new characters to take on the franchise after them. This is not that, which I think is fantastic, because throughout the movie, there's one new character that really is brought in, and if you've seen any of the promotional images or things like that for the movie or the trailers, you know it's Jenna Ortega already. But really, other than that, she's the only new character that is meant to have any impact on the franchise going forward, I guess. That's nice because they really keep Lydia as sort of like the main character. They're not really trying to replace her or set someone else to serve her role, if that makes sense. With the way the movie ends, they still make it pretty clear that Lydia is still the star here. And that's good because if they decide they do want to make more sequels, they have a really good jumping off platform, and it feels like they're going to try to cram less new stuff and new characters that we don't know and love from earlier movies down our throats. If they do decide to go the legacy sequel route, I think it would be a good idea to go a few more Beetlejuice movies without replacing the cast until you get some more cast members in to give the audience time to grow and appreciate them, because then it might feel more worth it when they're carrying the franchise post whoever the actors are at the time. So that's a good thing. I like how they're doing that if they choose to make more sequels, which I totally would not mind if they did. Something else too, and I won't say too much about this, I won't get into spoilers, but about the halfway movie mark, maybe a little past halfway, there's a pretty nice plot twist. And from that plot twist, things just get going and going and going, and you're very much, I feel like, from that point in the movie on the edge of your seat, and it's very, very good. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about that much here now because that does get into spoiler territory, but we will talk about that in the spoiler zone. Another thing I gotta shout out, and I shouted this out in the last Beetlejuice review as well, so if you haven't seen that, definitely go see that because it helps bring some context into my point of view here. But in the first Beetlejuice movie, they did something, and they did it again in this movie, and I loved it. And that is, they used a lot of practical effects, they used really good sets and really good hair and makeup. Now I know times have changed a lot, but that has not stopped them from bringing those things back, and they look better than they ever have. I complained in the first Beetlejuice movie that there were some like blue screen shots that just looked really bad, and this movie does not have those same problems. It does not use a whole lot of CGI, thankfully. I know that Tim Burton himself said that he wants to avoid using CGI, and I think that's for the best. We'll have more thoughts on CGI shortly, though, so keep that in mind. If you watched any of my reviews, you're going to have heard me say this before, but I absolutely love when in movies they use popular music, if that makes sense. And this movie definitely does that. And they do something really good because they don't quite try to copy and paste all the Harry Belafonte that they did in the first Beetlejuice. I mean, there's like a little bit of that, but they really have their own kind of music choices. And I think the music choices are really good. I'll get into some specifics about those in the spoiler section as well, so make sure you stay tuned for that if you've seen the movie already. Also, I would be ashamed not to mention the acting. The acting from everybody is fantastic. They got a lot of big names in this movie as well. But yeah, everyone does a really great job. Specifically, the character, I guess, that really stuck out the most to me was Catherine O'Hara's character, who is Lydia's stepmom. And I don't know, I just feel like every scene she was in, she almost like stole the show and was like really funny, which is really interesting because I think in the first Beetlejuice movie, that's what Beetlejuice kind of did. But I feel like Catherine O'Hara, like whenever she would show up in the movie, she would just be making the best, funniest jokes, I guess, if that makes any sense. So yeah, her job specifically in the movie, and it may have just been the way the character was written. Either way, she did a great job, and her character was fantastic. Another thing I gotta mention too, this movie too, it's just very exciting. There's a lot going on. There's never a dull moment. There's always something interesting happening. So there was never a point in the movie where I was watching it and I was bored, which is great. A big killer for me when it comes to enjoying movies is if it's boring. Because in my opinion, a boring movie is worse than a bad movie. And this movie, nothing boring about it. It's very attention grabbing. It keeps your attention at every moment. And so I quite enjoyed that. Not to mention, it is also a very funny movie. And something I thought was interesting too. I was thinking about this on my drive home. But they utilize a lot of different forms of comedy in this movie, which is kind of nice because then you don't have to have the same sense of humor as maybe your friend who thought it was funny to still find moments in the movie that you think are funny. Because there were moments in the movie where I thought I could tell they were making some type of joke, and I personally didn't think it was that funny, but I understood the people around me were thinking it was funny, some people, just based on tastes. Then they made other jokes that felt like very different kind of jokes that I may have thought were funny. So I think the way it approaches comedy is very, very interesting and very, very unique. And I don't know that I've ever seen that or at least noticed it in a movie before. So that was very nice. I very much appreciated seeing that. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into the non-spoiler bad stuff. So ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, my biggest problem with this movie is the plot because I feel like there's so much going on and it sort of feels like the first half of the movie they're trying to cram and set up so many plot points. Then the second half of the movie, they're almost, dare I say, hastily trying to close all the plot points that they opened, which is kind of weird, and I don't think that they satisfyingly pay off a lot of those plot points. I can talk a little bit more about that in the spoiler section, but I'm just going to say that the way it is now. But the other thing I think is kind of weird too. This might be a sort of conspiracy theorist in me, but I almost feel like this movie better follows the plot of a play than it does a movie. So with a movie, you have the 3-act structure where you have about, if it's a 2-hour movie, about 30 minutes for Act 1, and then the rest of the movie for about an hour or so is Act 2, and then the last 30 minutes is Act 3 where you have your climax and your resolution. I feel like this movie, with how I mentioned the first half, setting everything up, and the second half, just kind of rushing through, full sprint to the end, closing all the plot points, I feel almost like this movie was made to almost be done in a 2-act structure like a play is, meaning that in a play, they usually make Act 1 as a big setup to whatever the conflict is, and then Act 2 is them resolving the conflict, if that makes sense. Where this movie feels kind of similar in that regard, which, again, this is the theorist in me, maybe this is wishful thinking, I know this might be a bit of a stretch, but it almost makes me think, what if they're trying to make a musical sequel? Because the musical has done very well. It's a cult favorite. And I personally love the musical, which I do. I'm actually going to go see the musical very shortly in just a few weeks. So I do plan on getting a review up for that as well, just to get all my Beetlejuice stuff done and up for you guys in case you're interested in hearing my thoughts on a lot of the different parts of the franchise. But I almost feel like maybe the success of the musical had a lot of influence on this movie in that regard. Not in every way, but I do feel like that is definitely worth mentioning and thinking about. So again, maybe I'm just reaching a little too far here and trying to connect some dots that aren't actually there, but I can't help but think that. With the CGI in this movie, as I mentioned before, there's one scene specifically where they use CGI, and I'm thinking to myself, this looks pretty awful, and which is unfortunate. So I don't know what happened with that in that scene, but I don't want to give it away. But I feel like if you try to watch for CGI in this movie, The one point where you definitely notice it is going to be the point that I'm talking about. And it's not the shot from the trailer where Beetlejuice like makes this crazy face and his eyes kind of cartoonishly pop out of his head and his tongue flies out. It's not that, because that's supposed to look cartoony. So I kind of let that have a pass. But there's another moment that's not supposed to look cartoony that I can just see the CGI and I'm thinking to myself, this specific thing looks really bad. Now, thankfully, it's a really short scene, but it still distracted me. And that's not good. Something else I want to say, too, about this movie I think is kind of weird is in the movie, there's a really random disco number that just pops in. And it doesn't do anything for the plot. It's just kind of there for some reason. And it didn't really need to be there. And so if it's not something that points toward the resolution or isn't going to be important, why is it there? That's kind of my thought. But that's going to conclude my non-spoiler section of this review. So if you want to avoid spoilers, check the timestamps and skip ahead to the conclusion where I will be spoiler-free once again. But in the meantime, we're going to go full spoilers for this next section. So the spoiler section for the good things of this movie. For one, at the beginning of the movie, they establish that Lydia's job is she's like a TV show host for like a psychic show, which I think makes sense. And given how we saw her character set up in the last movie, how she can see and talk to dead people, she's like the only person to do that. Personally, the capitalist in me is saying good for her because she's making money off of her super exclusive gifts. Something else in this movie that I have put in the good section, and it's going to sound sort of bad of me to say this, but elephant in the room. Jeffrey Jones, he's an actor. He was in a lot of stuff. He was in like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he was in the original Beetlejuice. He was Lydia's dad, right? Well, in case you didn't know this, let's just say he's on a specific registry for taking explicit photographs of someone he shouldn't have because of their age being way younger than they should. That's the YouTube-friendly way of me saying that. The more, vengeful version of me, if you want to say, thinks that he should have a millstone tied around his neck and thrown into the ocean. That being said, it was cathartic to see in a clay animated sequence, which this clay animated sequence was done very well, so I got to give credit to that too. More practical effects stuff. It was very cathartic to me to see him getting bloodily eaten by a shark. A sick, twisted part of me enjoyed seeing that happen to him. I'm being completely honest and open right now. Yeah, so there was that, and I mean, he wasn't really in the movie, which is fantastic. They have like a photo or two of him, and then there's that claymation scene, and then I think they have some type of voice match person who's like kind of sort of voicing him, because we see his character in the afterlife, but his whole like head is bitten off, but he's still like making like mumbles of like his voice, and it still kind of sounds like him. So I don't know. I will say though, it was probably really awkward trying to hire a voice match for Jeffrey Jones, especially given that you'd have to be putting out a job listing for a very infamous person. And so it'd be really weird and awkward people who would willingly go and audition for that. So I just kind of wonder how they would have done that if that's the path that they took. Another thing I got to mention in this movie too, I mentioned the music. Well, some of the songs that they use in there, I want to talk about specifically. For one, the first song that I noticed, at least in the movie, was Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. And I love Jimmy Buffett. Both my parents like Jimmy Buffett. And so we actually really hated, and here's a true story. We were getting ready to go on vacation, okay? We're getting ready to go on a cruise. The morning, we were waking up and getting our things put together in our car to pack it up and take it with us. The news breaks that Jimmy Buffett died. And it was so tragic, especially given that we were about to go on vacation, about to go on a cruise, about to hit the seas, knowing that Jimmy Buffett, who's the most prolific songwriter of that kind of genre, just died, which was very, very sad. But I bring that up because I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it felt to me like a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a tribute to Jimmy Buffett that they did with that. So maybe I'm just reading into things, but either way, the fact that they used it, and in the context they used it, where it's someone who's dead in the afterlife listening to Jimmy Buffett, I can't help but appreciate that. So got to give props to that. Also, they used the Bee Gees song Tragedy, and they used it in the trailer, and I love the song, and I think it just makes a lot of sense and just sounds really good in the whole Beetlejuice afterlife context and setting. Plus, the sequence that is used too is also quite entertaining and very fun to watch. So, gotta give credit where credit is due for that one as well. The other song I gotta give credit to is MacArthur Park, which is a song I was vaguely familiar with. When I was first hearing it, I was kind of like, this is kind of strange, but then also like it worked really well. And basically, it's another one of those kind of like possession dance scenes similar to the banana boat thing. But to be quite frank, I think I like this sequence a lot better than the banana boat sequence that was in the first Beetlejuice movie. I also want to point out too, Danny Elfman returned for the score, and Danny Elfman, I mean, he's incredible. We all know that. And of course, being the incredible score composer he is, he did an amazing job with this movie as well. So again, credit where credit is due. I also want to point out, Danny DeVito plays a very small role in this movie, and Danny DeVito is another actor that I love in just about everything he's in. I just think he's hilarious. Physically, I know he's got some type of condition, making him kind of like short and stubby and stuff like that. So he's got an interesting look to him, but he kind of uses it in the physicality of that to his comedic advantage, which I think is great and really funny. And so even though he didn't really do a whole lot in this movie, I still like seeing Danny DeVito wherever I can. And Danny DeVito has been in at least 2 other Tim Burton movies that I can think of. Because he was in Dumbo and Batman Returns. He may have been in another one too. But either way, it's nice seeing a lot of Tim Burton's close friends coming back into his movies for whatever reasons, for whatever roles. So Danny DeVito, gotta love him. Another thing I gotta bring up too, this is just a really small thing, but I appreciated it. The movie opened in a very similar fashion to the original movie, where they're kind of panning over the streets of the town that they're in and everything like that, and then they zoom in on the house and they just kind of stay there for a little bit. The thing that I loved is they did that whole thing and they didn't have to put a spider in it, okay? Because if you go back and watch my original Beetlejuice review, that's a nitpick I have because I have terrible arachnophobia. Therefore, I appreciated not having to see a spider there. I was a little scared at first, and then it wasn't there, and I'm like, whew, sigh of relief. So that's fantastic. Another thing I got to bring up too, this movie, it really does lean into a little more horror tropes and horror themes, if you sit and think about it, with specifically the ending. And what I mean by that is this. So they conclude the movie, they banish Beetlejuice again, and throughout the movie, Lydia is having problems where she keeps seeing Beetlejuice places, just kind of like there, almost like taunting her. So she's having some struggles with that. And by the end of the movie, you would think that it would stop for whatever reason. I don't know why. I guess just because she got past that. But then it's revealed that she has this long dream sequence. And it sort of reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street, honestly. Because she had this dream sequence, and it all starts off, goes really good and very happy. And then suddenly just kind of like turns dark. And then she thinks she wakes up from the dream, only to find Beetlejuice right there. And then she wakes up, she's kind of like a dream within a dream, so kind of like Inception. Just kidding. So she has the dream within the dream, she wakes up from both of them, and then she realizes that, oh crap, Beetlejuice is still there. And that's where the ability, I think, for a sequel to comes from. So I have a really strong feeling also, given the naming conventions, that they might try to make at least one more sequel, because they had Beetlejuice, then they had Beetlejuice Beetle Juice, and of course say his name 3 times, Beetlejuice, 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 he appears. So that would make sense to me. Given how this movie went, I would like to see another Beetlejuice movie, because they did a lot of things in this movie that I mentioned before that I thought were very good, very entertaining. And even if it's not a good movie, as long as it's a very entertaining movie, that matters a lot to me, if that makes sense. But with the good must come the bad, and so if we get into these spoiler bad things, this is where I'm really gonna let loose on a lot of stuff. But the first half of the movie, like I said before, kind of sets up so much stuff. It sets up so many plot points. You have the earliest plot point, if not mistaken, is Jeffrey Jones' character dying, Lydia's dad. They set that up. Then they bring back Beetlejuice's, they introduce this character, his ex-wife, who is some like former death cult leader. So then they bring that in, and then they set up the whole plot sort of with, and they get into this a little bit before. Lydia Dietz is dating Rory, who is basically her, like, I don't know, management producer or something like that on her psychic show that she has. They have that going on, and then they set up a plot point where, hey, they decide they're going to get married, and then they do that. And then Lydia's daughter, Jenna Ortega's character, she runs into this boy in the town that she starts kind of talking with and getting a little flirty with. Those kind of things. And plus you have the fact that they set up that Lydia is taking these pills for whatever reason. Not entirely sure why. They set that up early on. They set a lot of things up really early on. And then they kind of pick them up and then just kind of run with them. And they go with them. And they set up so many things and they don't have time to give them all satisfying endings. So it's not that they're bad plot points. It's just that they were not handled the greatest. So it's kind of bringing things in. Here's kind of what happens. So basically, Lydia finds out that the guy she was getting ready to marry is a con man, and he was just met her and was dating her because she was vulnerable and he can make money off of her skills and abilities, which I kind of saw coming from a mile away. There was that, and then they never resolve Lydia with the pills. So I don't know what that's about, but that's just a sign of bad writing. When you set up a plot point and you don't do anything with it. They also talk about in the movie how Lydia, she was married, and that's where Jenna Ortega's character comes in because she plays Lydia's daughter. She was apparently married at one point, and her husband died. And Lydia cannot see with her, I don't know what, is it clairvoyant? I don't know. Her ability to talk to the dead. She, for some reason, cannot talk to or find her husband, her former husband, who died. And so there's some rifts between that because Jenna Ortega's character then, I forget her name, honestly, so I just keep referring her to Jenna Ortega's character. She doesn't believe in ghosts because she thinks her mom's faking because she should be able to talk to her father if she can talk to ghosts, right? Which makes sense. So I'm not super upset about that specifically. But then in the end, both those characters go to the afterlife. And in the afterlife, they find him. And after they find him, they kind of talk. And he addresses and says, hey, I'm sorry you guys couldn't talk to me or whatever. But, that's it. And I'm thinking to myself, that is not satisfying at all. So I don't know what the heck that problem is. So there's that, there's the pills. Those are the two biggest issues I have with the plot points that they've set up. The plot point that I personally kind of sort of found the most interesting was that this boy Jenna Ortega's talking to. I thought it was kind of weird. I didn't quite get it because, for one, you find him in a treehouse in the movie. And I'm like, what the heck is a teenage boy doing in a treehouse? That just seems kind of dumb to me. They do explain that, though, and it makes a lot of sense. But what happens is she's talking to this boy, only to find out that this boy is actually dead. And she has the same psychic abilities that her mother has, she finds out. And so this boy, who she finds out she's dead afterwards, they kind of start flirting. They get this kind of low-key romance going on. But essentially they find out then, and this was the big plot twist, that he actually died. But before he died, he murdered both of his parents. And so we see the parents earlier in the movie. We don't see their faces, though. I knew that was immediately strange when I first saw it. He also has a handbook to the undead or underworld or whatever they call it in the movie. He's got one of those, which I really should have seen it coming, and I didn't see it coming, probably because I wasn't expecting it. But there was that plot point. And that was all good, and that was exciting. And when they got that going, I was like, ooh, this could be really interesting. Because we find out that he is actually trying to get Jenna Ortega to switch spots with him so he can come back to life and then leave her for dead, which is very, very interesting. And that's really the linchpin that sets the whole Act 2 in motion. But the way they resolve it, I'm not satisfied with, because what happens then is Lydia goes to Beetlejuice and agrees to marry Beetlejuice if he can help her save her daughter, right, from this whole situation. So they do that. They go to the underworld. He takes care of the guy, but he takes care of the guy in 5 seconds and in no satisfying conclusion because, someone who's got malicious plans, you want to see bad things happen to them. You want to see it kind of backfire, blow up in their face, and they just dispatch of him so quickly. So that's a little disappointing because I was really invested in that plot point. The other plot point, and this plot point I don't think really serves much purpose at all. Catherine O'Hara's character. She also dies. What happens is she's doing this weird art stuff, which is where a lot of her comedy comes from in this movie. This weird art stuff, and she buys these fancy snakes that have been defanged, or so she was told, to do some type of art piece or whatever. I don't know. It's weird. It's modern art crap. They're kind of intentionally making a joke of it, so I'm not going to spend too much time trying to reason with it or say that it's bad because it's not supposed to be good to begin with. But she's doing this, and she's got these 2 CGI snakes. This is where that really bad CGI came in, by the way. CGI snakes, and they bite her because they have not been defanged. She was basically scammed, and then she dies from it. And they don't really do anything with that, other than having her and her husband reunite then at the end of the movie, because they're both dead. And technically, Lydia and Jenna Ortega would still be able to talk and communicate with her, I guess. But I don't know. It just seems kind of pointless. I don't really get why they did it. And it felt kind of like shoehorned in, like it didn't feel very important to anything that was going on. So why they chose to even do it and tell that story, kind of, it doesn't make sense to me. Another problem I had with this movie. So with a good sequel, you want to be able to see and understand what happened between that time, and you need to understand why certain characters are not present. And characters that were very important, in fact, they were probably the most important characters of the first Beetlejuice movie, are the Maylands, okay? Which are Alec Baldwin and his wife, and they're nowhere to be found in this movie. And they do address it like once in a very, very unsatisfying way, where basically Lydia Dietz just says that they found a loophole in their death contract or whatever, and like escaped or vanished or whatever, and that so unsatisfying because I have so many more questions now than answers, if that makes sense. Because how did they do it? Where did they go then afterwards? And like, what the heck? Why would they leave as well? Because I thought things were going pretty good for them from how we saw at the end of first Beetlejuice. So I really don't know. To be fair though, as I mentioned in the first review that I did for the first Beetlejuice, I really don't care for their characters that much anyways. So it's not super... I'm not really emotional about it, but I also think that the storyteller in me wants a more finite conclusion and answer, and wants to have explained why this happened. Now, that's going to wrap up my spoiler section of this review, so we're going to get right into the conclusion. In the end, Beetlejuice Beetle Juice has plenty of flaws, but to answer the question we asked in the intro, is it good? Kind of, a little bit. I objectively don't think I would say it is as a good put together plot as the original one, but I don't think it's necessarily bad either. However, on the flip side of things, if you ask me my personal opinion, quite frankly, I actually really enjoyed the viewing experience of this movie a lot more than the first one. I just think that they had more going on. It was more exciting. And for me personally, I would much rather watch this movie over the original. So that might be a hot take. Probably is a hot take. But that all being said, how am I going to rate this movie? Well, I'll tell you how I'm going to rate this movie. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know I gave some hot takes there at the end as far as how my ranking goes, but that's what the comment section is for. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, go ahead and dislike it. It's fine either way. If you have any other ideas about this movie, things that you liked, things you didn't like, or any problems that you had with me and how I went about things, hey, leave a comment with the size of my channel right now at the time I'm making this video. Really easy for me to look at comments and reply to them. So I'd love to start a conversation with you down there. But if you have not already, please feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. That's going to wrap it up for me, ladies and gentlemen. That was my review of Beetlejuice Beetle Juice. I'm K-Swope, and I will see you in the next one.